Right back across for a blast. Score!
And Beach just ripped the puck. It's Richter and Beach. And it comes right at you. 2-1. Both goals for Pittsburgh on a power play, and the Rangers.
Hey, welcome to today's Intangibles for Performance, presented to you by A-Mind Training, myself, Chris Beach, and today we're going to be talking about the flourishing strength, critical flourishing strength in any performance environment, having a sense of self-kindness and compassion. Now, I know all my competitive athletes out there, high-level athletes, sport fanatics are asking themselves possibly right now, what does self-kindness and compassion have to do with competition, aggressiveness, toughness, especially in my sport, hockey. But it is important and it is critical. And I've played with some of the best players to ever put on skates, and they most definitely had this characteristic, this sense of self-kindness and compassion. They may not have labeled it that, they may not have paid attention to it or even knew that that's what it was, but they had it, and we'll get to that later. But let's kind of rewind back to where we're at in this series. And as you know, I've been chronicling my time from a young player up, as a young prospect, up through junior, a highly ranked prospect. The story has taken us through 2 NHL training camps with the Washington Capitals as a first-round draft pick, 7th overall, and into the offseason before my first year pro, where I was involved in a trade for one of the most famous mullets to ever play the game, Jaromir Jagr. He went from Pittsburgh to Washington. Now, heading into Pittsburgh, again, exciting. First camp in Pittsburgh. Mario Lemieux had come back from a 3-year hiatus the year before, so I knew I was going to get a chance to meet him and be on the ice with him. Huge idol of mine growing up. There's other players I like, Alexei Kovalev, Martin Straka, Robert Long, these guys I looked up to. Stefan Richer was there, who was someone that I really idolized in the 90s as a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. So he was there. So it was a neat experience. And I remember the first time I met Mario was at the charity golf tournament they have opening camp, and it was after the tournament had finished. I hadn't seen him all day, and I opened the doors to the clubhouse, and I swear it was like rays of light from the heavens coming down, and there he was right in front of me in his chair. And it was a surreal experience, but it turned out to be a skylight in the clubhouse. It wasn't rays of light from heaven, but anyways, it looked like it. And I walked right up to him, shook his hand, and I believe I said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Lemieux." I hope I said that, anyways. And he said, "We're going to have a great year, kid." So a surreal experience with big number 66, and I'd head into that camp ready to make that team, and I made the team in camp, and throughout the camp there was a lot of chatter in the newspaper around the room, again, that I was potentially the next young guy to come in and take over that franchise as a franchise player for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So a lot of hype again coming in, and I played well, made the team. And it was a great experience. Now, when we talk about self-kindness and compassion, I experienced a variety of different things that year that that really I've thought about a lot. And as I mentioned previously, I had a tendency to have a little bit of negative self-talk. I was really hard on myself. I had a tendency to project negative outcomes. And this was something that really I had started at the age of 11 years old. I remember specifically the tryout, where it was the first time I started to project negatively that I wasn't going to make a team. And I did the same thing heading into Pittsburgh Penguins camp. And I remember the conversation specifically with Johan Hedberg, who was nicknamed the Moose. I don't know if anyone from my era and older would remember Johan. He came up from the Manitoba Moose to Pittsburgh, and he had a moose on his helmet, so nicknamed Moose. Anyways, I remember telling him, I said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to make this team. And he said, what are you talking about? They have big plans for you. So again, just that negative self-talk, that negative projection was something that I was managing as a young kid and all the way through my career. And you know, message to parents and kids out there, you know, nip that in the bud immediately. It seems harmless, but it can perpetuate itself. So nip that in the bud immediately. Even if you're 10, 11 years old, find ways to nip that in the bud. So so moving through that year was a phenomenal experience. I played well. I did what I could with the experience. I started on a line with Mario Lemieux the first few games. Played well as a 20-year-old, had 10 goals, 25 points. I was dash 25, but you know, we weren't an unreal team. I definitely could have worked on my defensive game, which would come later down the road for me in my career. You know, scored some nice goals on some pretty good goaltenders, and had a decent year, and had some great experiences with that level of play. One of the neatest things that happened, not only in you know, the games or the competition, but just after practice, almost every day we would get together a game of shinny, and it would be me, Alexei Kovalev, Robert Lang, Martin Straka, Jan Hrdina, and someone else would come in, Alexei Morozov, and we'd just play shinny after practice. And that was one of the highlights of that year, was playing pickup games with those guys. So it was a neat experience. And you know, the thing about self-kindness and compassion is that the best players have it. And they may not know they have it or label it. It's there. And an example that I can think of, you know, when I was in Pittsburgh practicing, I remember specifically, and it's burning in my memory, because here's Mario Lemieux in practice. I'm behind him in line, and he makes a pass across the ice, across the blue line, to try and hit someone wide streaking down the wall, and he literally fires the pass 2 feet over the guy's stick. And he looked at me and he said, "Oops." And I was thinking, this guy's not supposed to make any mistakes. He's the best player ever to play the game. He's not. He doesn't make mistakes. But he does, and he did. And you know, I thought about that moment a lot, because it clicked for me. I was like, it really clicked for me. And the fact that we can look at that and say, you know what, that's the type of self-kindness and compassion you need to have, is that ability to make a mistake and just let it roll off your shoulders. And now you could debate he was that way because he was so good, but you could also debate that he was so good because of his mindset and his ability to manage mistakes and not be hard on himself and not be as self-critical. You know, if I was in that situation and I lived it and breathed it my whole career, if I made a mistake in practice like that, I would be extremely hard on myself, and it wouldn't be an oops moment. You know, it'd be a little bit of a struggle in dwelling on a play like that. And so, you know, adopting that type of mentality through making mistakes, being kind to yourself, not beating yourself up, is really critical to maximizing your potential, maximizing your ability to have a consistent confidence. And for some, it's quite natural. For others, it's more work to manage that type of critical thinking and negative self-talk. But it is definitely something that you can work on. And with what I do with a lot of the athletes is working on that self-critic and being kind to yourself and being compassionate to yourself. And it's really important, because being hard on yourself is just not a great habit, and it's a habit. It doesn't get you to where you want to go. In fact, the research shows being kind to yourself is a better way to get to where you want to go in terms of your aspirations and goals. And it doesn't mean you're soft. It doesn't mean you're not competitive. It means you're focused. It means you're able to make a mistake, note it, learn from it, move on quickly to the next play without dwelling on it. That's what it is. That is being kind to yourself and compassionate towards yourself.